Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck and I get to talk to the most fascinating people. These folk today have come all the way from Canyonville, and if you know the history of that road, it was the toughest way to come to the Oregon Territory. When you drive I-5, just think that that was a creek bed down in the bottom and a little trail, and if the creek was too high, well, let's ask them. Welcome, Clyde and Vernita. I'm so glad you came. Canyonville has a great history, right?
Right.
What do you know about the early pioneers?
Well, it was quite a trail. The old Highway 99 was quite a trail. I think from our area to Portland took 8 hours over the old road.
Do you have any clue how long it'd take from there to Grants Pass?
Well, 40 miles would have took quite a while. Usually it's about a 30 mile an hour, 35 mile an hour twisty road, and places that probably couldn't even go that fast. But
right, and you're talking when there was a road.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not a horse and buggy trail.
yes, right.
Or a horse and covered wagon trail.
Yeah.
When did you come to Southern Oregon?
We moved to the Glendale area in 1948.
Well, what brought you to Oregon?
Well, we lived in Sacramento, California, and after the war, we were building houses, and we got to thinking it would be better to raise our kids in the mountains, in the hills somewhere or another. So we came up 101 to Grants Pass and looked at properties here and there. We had one more to look at in the Glendale area, and it was a mom and pop country store, had a garage and a wrecker and 5 little cabins. Well, we knew the highway was going to change, but we thought we could make a living there, so it was in our price bracket.
That makes a big difference when you say it was after the war.
Yes.
We've got this flag, all 48 stars, right?
Yes.
And you had a chance to salute this?
Oh, yes.
You're talking World War II?
Yes.
World War II.
What's the story? What's your story?
Well, Bernita and I got married on November 30th, and Pearl Harbor happened on the
The 7th.
7th of December.
Now we're talking this little gal and this little guy.
That's right.
And this is when you were dating?
Yeah.
And then the war broke out, and what happened?
Well, you didn't know what was going to happen. It kind of upset your plans, and we did look at a 5-room house that we were thinking about buying. What was the price on it?
$5,000.
About $5,000 for a 5-room house those days. But with the war coming on, you didn't know what was going to happen. So if we knew later, they froze the rents at that rate. But we were a little bit frightened on that, so we rented a little house for $17 a month, all during the war.
And this is where?
In Sacramento.
Ooh, I don't want to drop the flag.
9th Avenue.
And
After the war was over, we bought it.
$17.
$17 a month.
Yeah.
But how long did you stay in Sacramento?
Well,
You went overseas, right?
I had already taken 2 years of aircraft training, and I really needed another 6 months before I could get my A&E license. But the whole school was a draftable age, and so the school shut down and didn't have any students. All the students were drafted or went in the service.
Now you're talking about this time in your life,
Yeah.
right? You're just a young buck with loving cars. What kind of car?
That's a 31 Plymouth, 4-cylinder.
Your car?
Yeah.
Did he ever take you for a ride in this rig?
Oh, of course. Lots of times.
This is your era.
Yeah.
Young love, even the written songs about you here.
Yeah.
So then, when you went into the
So then after the school closed down, I went to work out at McClellan Field repairing airplanes until they called me up for the draft. Well,
Uncle sent you a letter.
yeah, sent me a letter, and I got it just along in first part of November, and Vernita was about to bring our first son into the world. So I went to the draft board, and I appealed to them that I could have 30 days more, well, be there when she delivered. So
Were they kind?
Yeah, they were kind. In fact, the draft board wasn't exactly right in Sacramento, and they were down by the Sacramento River, a place called Ileton, and I think they kept all their files in tomato boxes. And I think they lost me for 3 months because they didn't call me until March of 43.
And so you got to be there for the birth of your son.
That's right.
And the first couple of months.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, did you continue working there?
Well, they drafted me and sent me to Monterey. Then I came right back to Sacramento, went to work in McClellan Field with the same boys that I was working with, only now I'm getting $21 a month and I get free room and board.
But you were paying rent of 17, and how were you keeping body and soul together?
Well, it didn't cost that much in those days.
Were you working
Well, I worked when he was overseas.
with a tiny baby? What kind of work did you do?
Well, Ronnie was 8 months old when 8.5 months old when he went overseas.
And so you went right to work?
Well, not right away. I took care of 2 little girls that their mother was working, and their father was a bigamist, and so they had taken him to prison, and so I had the 2 little girls.
We don't even hear the word bigamy very often anymore, but he sure did the wrong thing. Now, so you were a working woman. You just worked in your home.
I worked in my
with
home.
child care. But then it's bye-bye. Was that scary when you sent this guy off to war? I mean, to real...
The day we were shipping out, they let the wives come right on the Army base there. And so she brought Ronnie, and he was about 8 months old. And the guys wanted to bring him along as a mascot. He was a happy baby. But I shipped out. In fact, they had made me a corporal 1 week, and the next week they gave me a sergeant rating because they assigned us to an airplane to take the engines off. Then we put them back on, tested them, so they saw that we knew what we were supposed to know. So they gave me a sergeant's rating. And then when I got overseas, I got a staff sergeant. Well, I got $118 a month, and I sent $100 home, and I kept $18.
What did you do with 18 whole dollars?
Well, in those days, you didn't need much, except to go on leave or something, And,
Well, where did they take you?
well, 5 days of train ride across the United States. In those days, the trains were like cattle cars almost. There was no air conditioning or anything, and it was August. And I remember when we changed engines in Salt Lake City, they were coal burners, and so I got all this soot, and you had to have the windows open so the soot came in the cars. And by the time we got to Newport News, Virginia, we were pretty near black.
Sooty mess, because they didn't have showers on there or anything.
No, of course not. So anyhow, we were in Newport News, and this was the first experience of humidity of the East Coast. And you're sweating all over, and you can't wipe it off enough. It's running down your arms and your elbows, and you're dripping in your food. I had never was in something like that. So then we shipped out on a boat that was formerly used as a banana boat from the Panama to the New York area.
You're telling me a real banana boat.
Well, it did haul bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we joke about banana boats, but they were put into duty during the war.
That's right. This ship was a small ship, and it could bed down 1,500, but we had 3,000 troops on it. So you stayed on deck for 12 hours, then you were down for 12 hours.
So you took turns in the same bunk.
With somebody else.
You and Joe had day shift and night.
Yeah.
Now, was this, when you first got to England, what did it look like?
Well, it took us 14 days going across. We spent 5 days going up the coast to St. John's, Newfoundland. And we were supposed to meet up with some more ships that were going over. In those days, I didn't find out until I came home, that the Germans were sinking 100 of our vessels a month. That's all sizes. So the submarines were really active. Well, in July, and I went over in August, July, the British had broken the German code. So then they could tell a little more where those submarines were. So there ended up being 3 troop carriers and 5 corvettes. And corvettes are kind of like little fighter boats. And they were supposed to chase the submarines or whatever. So we were in zigzag across the country, and we did get a couple alarms. I don't know if there were subs. Anyhow, the boats went out and they threw these depth charges, and whether they sunk anything, we don't know. But anyhow, we got over to Scotland, came in on the River Clyde. I told everybody they named that river after me.
Of course, Clyde.
And here was a little band welcoming us and giving us hot tea. And first thing we noticed, we got on the English train, and you couldn't even feel it move when it started. You know, they were so far ahead of us. They had hydraulic bumpers from one car to the other car, and it wasn't jerk, jerk, jerk like our train.
Like you came across the U.S. Now, did they feed you well on that train, and did people wave flags as you were coming across?
They were really happy that we got. Of course, I think we got there in the night, and by the time we traveled down England to about 70 miles from London, where we unloaded, then it was daylight then. So.
Now, when you left the U.S., were people waving goodbye on along the train?
In fact, we came into Iowa, and our train broke one of the arms on the engine. Just about kicked it over. Well, we were about 1.5 miles or 2 from Marion, Iowa. And so they finally pulled us into the town, and the whole town people showed up, and they brought us cookies and things to drink and
magazines.
Magazines. It was really nice.
I wonder if that town remembers the train. I think I ought to send them this tape and let them know that you appreciate it now.
Boy, we did. That was wonderful.
60 years later.
Yeah.
And a broken train that might have tipped over. How many were on your train? All military?
Yeah, all military. Strictly a military.
Crowded?
Yeah, probably about 250 in our group, I think, something like that.
Well, a little something you brought from England. No? You didn't bring this from England.
Yeah, I did. It came to England.
Yeah, it came. That's what you got in the mails in the wartime. They were what they call a V letter, and they're miniature-like.
Tiny.
And of course, you know, when you're over in the service, all your letter is censored. So some military officer has to read it every bit that you write, because you don't tell them just where you are, you know, and what's happening.
And it was 6 cents. Airmail wasn't enough, so they had to put on 6 more cents. Do you remember if you had to pay that?
I don't remember that, no.
Tiny little writing, beautiful. Hello, kids, it starts out. And who's this from?
This is from me to my friends, I think in Stockton, was it? Mm-hmm. In Stockton,
In California.
Yeah,
And what was it like to get mail?
Oh, that was wonderful. Vernita wrote me every day, but I wrote her about every other or every third day because I didn't always have a lot to tell her. But while I was over there, I did go visit quite a few things because we could get on the trains and go different places. In fact, it was easier to get around on the bicycle. So I went to the town of Luton, which is north of London. That's the Raleigh Bicycle Factory, and I bought a bike.
Oh, probably with that extra $17 you had. Now, did you ever see the bombs bursting in air as they were bombing London, or
Well,
what was it
the
like?
Germans one time followed our planes back to our base, but they didn't bomb us. I think they wanted a bigger target. So anyhow, we had a crew of about 7 or 8 guys, and I was a crew chief. And it was our job we were assigned maybe 3, 4 airplanes, but sometimes we had to go off base. And one time we were told they had an airplane that just barely got across the channel down in the south part of England, close to Brighton. In fact, the town was Shoreham by the sea. And the English had a little field there. Most of the English fields were nothing but grass, just a grass turf. Well, our big old B-17 come in there with 2 engines out and wounded on board, and they sat down there and left 2 big ruts right across the field and up against a fence and stopped. So we took 2 engines. But before this time, our crew had a little bit of slack time, and so we thought we needed to build a trailer for our tools and our air compressors and all that gear. So we found a P-38 plane wheels and axle, and so we built us a trailer so we could hook it behind a GI truck, put a couple engines on, and away we go and do our job out in the brush.
Innovative,
Yeah.
creative, imaginative, willing. So here's this disabled plane. And what you have to do is take the engines out, put new ones in, turn it around. How'd you get it off the ground?
Well, they're sent in the U.S. engineers, and they laid down metal mats for a runway.
Is
They're
that
interlocking metal plates.
Do you know that in the early Oregon, they used to have wood boards that they used for highways, and I wished I could remember the name of that.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear of those roads?
Yeah.
Because the valleys would get so wet. And
That's right. Yeah.
my husband's on the camera over there. I bet he can tell me the name of it. This looks like one happy, happy dad.
Yeah.
Tell me about him. What happened here? He got home for a leave?
Yeah, he came home for an R&R, what they call an R&R.
Well, after 2 years.
After 2 years.
But go ahead and tell her. And she kept my picture before him all the time.
Oh, before the baby. So
See,
here's
that's
this.
what he looked like when he went overseas.
Oh, just 3 months old? Or
Well, he was 9 months.
9 months
No,
old.
8 months old.
And so this is your daddy.
Yeah.
Your daddy's in the war. Your daddy's coming home.
Well, he would see the soldiers on the street, and I had him in his little stroller, and every once in a while he'd look one up and down, and he'd say, "Not my daddy."
And when this guy came along, he said,
"That's my daddy."
no finer words, more welcome words ever.
Yeah.
Well, now we've got you all the way up to Oregon. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
with whom?
that's Clyde's grandfather and grandmother.
And they lived where?
They lived in Washington, but they came to visit us and helped me put things away when we came from Sacramento.
Because you moved with the children while he was gone?
No,
Oh.
not till well,
When I came home, well, you know, I went. They were supposed to take you back where you worked before. So I worked at McClellan Field for about 9 months, but they had to reduce their forces, which is the best thing that ever happened to you. You know, working for the government's not always the best thing. So I started selling home installation jobs, and then I got to building houses, and we built some houses, and then 48 come along. We said, let's go look for something different. So that's how we got up to Oregon.
Now, these
That
little
was-
kids, that's, and it looks like they're building a teepee over here.
Well, they were playing around. That was in the yard there at Glendale Junction.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about is Glendale Junction.
Yeah.
What? How did you end up there? A kid from...
Well, we had gone up the coast,
Looking at properties.
looking at properties and things. And
Why did you want to leave California?
we wanted to get out of the city.
Okay.
Raise our kids in the hills.
Okay. And you went up the coast and
We were looking, and well, we found property, but not any that we thought we could really,
until
we got to Grants Pass, and then we had one more place to look, and so we came the next day up to Glendale, and we found this little mom and pop store.
I love that mom and pop. That tells us that you had lots of things in that store. Everything from
Well,
soup to nuts.
We even had the Greyhound
Bus
bus
agency.
agency there.
And that's where the Greyhound bus dropped people off, and it's 4 miles to Glendale, so we
3
ran
miles.
a taxi service.
What was your taxi like?
Well, we
Was
had-
our car.
It was our car, whatever we had.
And so you probably knew some of the old miners and,
Yeah.
well, maybe.
Well, those days there were little sawmills all over the country. Glendale had about 3 or 4, but there were little portable mills all out in the woods. And then there were mines, and I remember one fella came in on the bus and he wanted to go to the Victory Mine. I had no idea where it was, but it was about 7 or 8 miles further west of Glendale on a little old forestry road. And so there was a lot of activity those days.
Now, you were the taxi driver?
Well, whoever was available. We also had a wrecker, so especially Saturday night. We were busy Saturday night pulling drunken loggers out of the woods or the roads or something, so.
Out of the ditch.
So.
And what were you doing while he was doing the pulling people out of the ditch? You ran the motel?
Well, we had
Run the store.
the store and the motel. We lived behind.
She pumped the gas. We had one electric and two gravity feed gas pumps.
Oh, I love those big globes. You'd have however many.
10 gallons.
10 gallons.
10 gallons you pumped up.
Yeah.
And then we serviced 17 logging trucks.
It wasn't long till we hustled, and he said you got coming. Okay, we were hustling for business, so we were finally end up gassing 17 logging trucks, and most of them wanted ethyl, and that was what was in the upright tank.
So I got quite a bit of
Exercising that muscle. Now,
And then there were some people in Glendale that took care of an ambulance and a mortuary. Well, they all of a sudden decided to move to Portland, and they thought we were going to starve to death. So they said, you just will have the ambulance along with the wrecker. Well, along with that ambulance is you became a deputy coroner, and you would pick up somebody when they died, take them to the little mortuary we had in Glendale. And then it wasn't too far after that the man who took care of the cemetery, the sexton, died. So I ended up being couldn't bury him unless I knew where to put him. So I ended up being the sexton for 15 years.
I can hardly wait to have you come back and tell that story, but this is a genuine train
Well, it's
made of,
Made out of logs and stuffed around
and
it.
who did this?
Oh, we did that just kind of cutting up, and we had a little drive-in there eventually, service station drive-in and a saw shop there at Glendale Junction, and so kids like to come over and play on these things, and I had one big log that I had bored holes through it this way and that way, and so they'd climb through that. And,
Do you have any pictures of that big log?
somewhere.
and we had one of Smokey the Bear, and so it was
Did you
fun.
make all these out of chainsaw?
Yeah.
Now, do you tell me that one kid came and asked
Yeah.
to ride on it?
He come up to the door and said, I want the key to that train. I said, oh, I couldn't give you the key to that train. Why? Well, first he asked for the key, and then he started running back, and then he come back and said, does it really take a key? I said, "Shit." Well, I thought, well, I'm afraid you'd drive it off. And so he answered his question, but we had a lot of fun with it.
Businessman of the Year. There you are.
Yeah.
19 and 50 something. You know, your stories are just great, but when I pulled out this, you said, oh, I know what that's all about. Give me the story.
Well, we used to make our dish towels out of feed sacks.
Flour sack,
Flour
dish towel.
sacks and feed
What else
sacks.
did you make out of them?
I made dresses for my little girl. Because it would only take a couple of flour sacks to make her a dress.
And some of them, they came printed pretty colors.
They were different colors,
They were
yes.
printed patterns too, weren't they?
But this one's 1936. I guess they hadn't gotten
34.
34, they hadn't gotten so clever. We've only got a couple minutes left, but let's tell me what that is.
Well, after we had the mom and pop store for a while, one of our renters came in and said, Clyde, you got to get into the chainsaw business. That's the going thing. Well, you know, I knew about airplanes, and so next thing you know, I went with him over to Roseburg, and I became a McCulloch chainsaw dealer. Bought one saw and some parts, and next thing you know,
You were it.
I thought I was busy enough already, but that soon
I
became
thought he was
our.
trying to kill me.
Well, our time's all up,
Yeah,
Clyde. I hope the two of you will come back. This is your family, right?
Uh-huh.
Oh, we're so glad, and maybe they can tell us more stories about you. Thanks for being my guest on Journeys and Journals. Aren't you glad they came all the way down I-5 and not Old 99? It's not a big trip.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying bye for now. And thanks again for coming.
Yeah, thank you.